Good morning, third graders. Okay, so I recreated our flowers that we had in that picture. I want to answer that question of what fraction of the vases have white flowers, and the other question, what fractions of the flowers are white, and then find out if our fractions are equivalent. Okay, so our first one, what fraction of the vases have white flowers? Well, I need to know how many vases I have, and that'll be my denominator. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 vases. Okay, so if I have 4 vases, that's my number of equal parts. And the fractions of vases with white flowers are 1, 2, 3. So 3/4 of my flowers have white vases. Okay, I'm going to circle that. And my next question is, what fraction of the flowers are white? So I need to count all the flowers. That will be my equal part. And that'll be my denominator. How many equal parts or how many flowers are there total? Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4 in that vase, 5, 6 in this vase, 7, and 8. So I have a total of 8 flowers. That's my denominator. That's my number of equal parts. Okay? And now my question is, how many of those flowers are white? What fraction of those flowers are white? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6/8 of the total number of flowers are white. Okay, so now we're going to draw models and put these two fractions on a number line and find out if they're equivalent or equal. Okay, so here I started a model already, and it's really important, like we talked about in class, it's really important to draw your models the same size. I didn't use a ruler because, like, on the test or in class, you don't always have a ruler available. So I just did my best to draw the models the same size. So I marked my halfway point. This will be, I'm going to do my first fraction, and I'll write them down here so I remember. 3/4, and the next one will be our 6/8. So when we're comparing fractions, I have the same size models to use. Okay, so now I have it in half. So now I have 2 equal parts. I want 4 equal parts. So I'm going to cut this half in half. And then I'm going to cut this half in half. And I'm trying to make them as equal as possible. Looks pretty equal. Okay, so now we have 0, I'm going to put the fraction at the top, 0/4, okay, where there's nothing. Then we have 1/4, which means this space here, okay. Then 1/2, which is also equal to 2/4. Okay, so that's equivalent, just like we talked about in class. Then we have 3/4, and the 1/2, 4/4, equivalent to 1/2. Okay, because they're at the same place in our diagram, in our model. And also 0/4 is equal to 0. Okay, so now 3/4 of the vases have white flowers. So 1/4, 2/4, and 3/4. Okay, so that's my model for the first one. The second one is 6/8. So I'm going to do the same thing I did with 4ths. First I'm going to cut it in half, making it as equal as possible. I'm going to cut it in half on this side. Now I have 4ths. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 times 2 is 8. So if I cut each of these in half, then I'd have 2, 4, 6, 8 equal parts. So keeping it as equal as possible, I'm cutting each 4th in half. Notice I did that very carefully. Okay, Well, I have 0. We're talking about eighths. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 equal parts. I have 0 eighths on this side. I always do my endpoints first. And I have 8 eighths on this side. 8 eighths we know is equal to 1 whole. And 0 eighths is equal to 0. Okay, then for the next part, right here, that we'll have 1 eighth, 2 eighths, 3 eighths, 4 eighths is equal to 1/2. It's in the same spot. 5 eighths, 6 eighths, 7 eighths, and 8 eighths. So I'm going to color in 6 eighths to see if my fractions are equivalent. So 1 eighth, 2 eighths, 3 eighths, 4 eighths, 5 eighths, 6 eighths, because it comes all the way up to 6 eighths. That's why it's 6 eighths. And I look, and it looks like my fractions are equivalent. So 3/4 equals 6 eighths. And if you remember, because you see it lines up perfectly. And I can also test that out doing multiplication, just like we've done in class. So remember, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. Okay, just like bunk beds. Remember we said your mom doesn't come in and say goodnight to your brother in the bottom bunk and then just leaves you and walks out of the room. If she says goodnight and gives a kiss to your brother or your sister, then she's got to say goodnight and give a kiss to you. Okay, so 4 times what equals 8? 4 times 2. And 3, so I have to do to the top what I did to the bottom. So 3 times 2 equals 6. So since we were able to do both and we have the fraction over here, we did come up with the same answer, then my test for equivalency does work. These two fractions, 3/4 and 6 eighths, are equivalent. So nice job. All right, so let's put them on a number line. It's basically the same exact thing. We're going to cut this in half again. Remember, this is our 3/4 and this is our 6 eighths. Okay, so I'm going to cut this in half. Okay, so now I have 1/4. 2/4 is equal to 1/2. It's in the same place. 3/4 and 4/4 is 1 whole. And remember, our fractions are always between our whole numbers. If this were to go on to 2, then I would make fourths between 1 and 2. It would be 1 and 1/4, 1 and 2/4, or 1 and 1/2, 1 and 3/4, and then 2. Okay, but we're only talking about the fractions between these two numbers. Okay, so 3/4, I'm going to put a dot where that is. Now I'm going to go ahead and go down here. I'm doing eighths, so I'm going to cut this in half, both sides. Now I have fourths. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I cut each of those fourths in half, I'm making really sure that I'm making equal parts. Okay, then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 parts. So now I gotta label it. 1, this is where I have a problem holding the phone more than I do doing the fraction. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. We know 4/8 is in the same spot. I'll put it up here. So it's equivalent or equal. 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, and 8/8, which is 1 whole. So 6/8 is my fraction, so I'm going to put a dot on 6/8. Then I'm going to look, and it looks like it lines up. They're in they're in the same spot on the number line. So I know that these two fractions are equivalent. Okay, very nice job. I hope you enjoyed flower fractions and you keep having a good break. Bye-bye.